Committee, Political Science Department, National Network on Cuba. I want to welcome our special guest this evening. Glad many of you could come out tonight. Miguel Fraga is the first secretary of the Cuban Embassy. And I stress the Cuban Embassy. For many years, whenever I introduced diplomats to audiences here in Minnesota, I oftentimes had to say the Cuban interest section. The interest section was prior to the embassy. And when the United States and Cuba reestablished diplomatic relations in 2015, the building, the location, the site in Washington, D.C. officially became Cuba's embassy. So it's a real pleasure to invite Miguel to be a part of this discussion. We've been trying to get Miguel to come out here for years, and we were afraid that maybe he was afraid of the cold weather in Minnesota and why he kept delaying his visit. But then he told me he spent 3 years in Canada as a Cuban diplomat, so I know the weather was no reason why he couldn't come. So he's here, and he's been part of a visit for the last 3 days. He met with a number of elected officials in I sent to the class the article that was in Minneapolis about his visit, which gives a fascinating history about what's been going on in Minnesota around Cuba issues. And it's for that reason Miguel realized he had to come to Minnesota. So without further ado, I'd like to present Miguel Fraga, the first secretary of the Cuban
Thank you so much, Professor. I am honored to be here. You know, probably you can ask you why I'm here. You know, why a Cuban diplomat comes to one university in Minnesota. Well, I have been in more than 30 universities in the United States, more than 30. And why? Because I really believe that there is not enough information about my country here. And because we want better relations between Cuba and the United States. So the opportunity for me to come to one university, to do presentations, to have questions from you, help me to understand how do you see my country and how we can work together. You know, this is a long presentation. Probably you are aware that Cubans are famous for long speeches. Don't worry. I will try to be brief. And at the end, if you have any questions, please feel free. People believe that when you are a diplomat, you are an expert in everything about your country. That is not the case, but I will try to do my best. So let's talk about US-Cuba relations. You can see here Washington Memorial in D.C., and you can see here Jose Marti Memorial in Havana. Jose Marti is our national hero. And you can see they are similars. And you can see that we have the same colors in our flags. There is a lot of common history between both countries. By the way, I'm sorry for my English. Probably need to improve, but I will try to do my best. So let's start with this. Opening questions. What do you know about Cuba? Every time I do these questions, I get different answers, but in general, people say, okay, Cuba is famous because cigars, rum, old cars. And when you say, well, what else do you know about Cuba? People say, okay, Bay of Pigs, the music crisis in 1962. And you say, well, what else? What do you know about Cuba now? The real issue is that, again, there is a lot of misinformation about my country. There is not enough information about my country. I will try to explain that. Would you like to visit Cuba? You can raise your hand. How many of you want to go there? Okay, that's great. That's the photo that we need. Do you consider that Cuba and the United States can have normal relations? This is a very important question, but the real question is why not? Oh, because Cuba is a communist country. Okay, but the United States has relations with communist countries. Oh, because Cuba only has one political party, but the United States has relations with countries that don't allow political parties. When I talk about communist country, I always use the example of Vietnam. How many soldiers do you lose in Vietnam? According to what I read, it's more than 58,000 soldiers. How many in Cuba? So, it's because human rights? Let's talk more about that. But I really believe that is not the real answer. Have you been in Cuba? You can raise your hand. How many of you? So this is what happened all the time. You ask the people, do you want to go to Cuba? The majority say yes. When you ask the people, have you been in Cuba? The majority has not been able. You know why? Because as Americans, you can go wherever you want. But it's prohibited by law to go as a tourist to Cuba. Tourism is prohibited. You need to qualify under one of the 12 categories, and you need a license to go to Cuba. For that reason, the majority of Americans has not been able to travel to Cuba.
Is that from the American government, or is it the law from Cuban government?
American government.
Oh.
The American government. And people don't know. When we restarted diplomatic relations in 2015, people believe, okay, everything is good now, everything is okay. But there are things like the embargo and like the travel ban that are still in place. So in order to go to Cuba, you need a license, and that's important. Do you consider that Cuba received fair treatment in the media? Well, that's for the end. If at the end of this presentation you already knew everything I'm going to say here, it's probably, and you read it in the media, it's probably that we received fair treatment in the media. So, what do you know about, I remember when I did this question, what do you know about Cuba? One student in American University in DC told me, I know about Cuba. And I said, what do you know about Cuba? He told me, I love Lucy. Do you remember the TV series? Yes, you are a young generation, but you know that there is a still in some cable channels. I love Lucy. I say, wow, first you missed the last 50 years. And second, Cuba is not Ricky Ricardo. So for that reason, Cuba is not I love Lucy, but it's not either a Scarface, because Cuba is not only, it's not Tony Montana either. We never invade the United States. I don't know if you saw this movie, Red Dawn, Patrick's wife, and it's about an invasion from Soviet Union and Cuba to Montana. That never happened, by the way. I don't know if you saw this movie, A Few Good Men. It's in Guantanamo. You have a military base there. You occupy part of our territory. And in this movie, you see Tom Cruise going to that base in a white uniform. And the person that is there say, okay, if the Cubans see that you are in white, they're going to believe that you are an official, and they're going to shoot you. Put in Google. Never we had shot nobody in the other part of the side of the fence. So that is also not true. I don't know if you followed this TV series that was recently, Designated Survivor. In one of the chapters, the President of the United States sent a delegation to Cuba, and they are kidnapped by guerrillas in Cuba. There is not guerrillas in Cuba. But it's what you see in the television in 2017. So if you want a good movie to understand Cuba, I recommend The Godfather, second part. Because that was real. The mafia going to Cuba to create a new Las Vegas with the complicity of the former dictator of Cuba, Batista. So, let's go there. Why the Cuban Revolution? This is a quote. Why the Cubans made a revolution in 1959? I believe that there is no country in the world, including any and all the countries under colonial domination, where economic colonization, humiliation, and exploitation were worse than in Cuba. In part owing to my country's policy during the Batista regime. I approved the proclamation with Fidel Castro made in the Sierra Maestra, when he justified call for justice and especially yearned to write Cuba off corruption. I will even go further. To some extent, it is as though Batista was the incarnation of a number of sins on the part of the United States. Now we should pay for those sins. In the matter of the Batista regime, I am in agreement with the first Cuban revolutionaries. That is perfectly clear. You know who said that? The majority of people don't know. Don't worry. President Kennedy. October 24, 1963. So almost a month before he was assassinated in Dallas. This is the man that approved Bay of Pigs. But probably thanks to that, we avoid a nuclear disaster in 1962 during the Missiles crisis. Because in 1961, when he approved Bay of Pigs, everybody told him, this is going to be very easy. The Cuban people don't want the revolution. They are going to support us. That doesn't happen. but it was a big failure. And we really believe that at this point, he was trying to improve the relation with Cuba, to be honest. So, let's go, what is Cuba? Well, Cuba is 11 million of people, so it's like Ohio. We are smaller than Pennsylvania. That is our GDP, and it's important to remember our GDP. We are number 64 out in 198 countries according to our GDP. Right now, this is our labor force, and you can see that 13% of our labor force is in the private sector. That is a huge change in Cuba. That comes almost from zero. And right now, 13% is in the private sector. And you can see the GDP per capita. By the way, all the numbers, or the majority of the numbers I'm going to present today comes from the World Bank. So you can go online and check it. But if you don't believe me, go to Cuba. So, this is also very important, and this is Cuba. Life expectancy, 80 years old. Every kid in Cuba is born in a hospital. Mortality rate, 4 children per 1,000 live birth. 99% of the Cuban children receive all the vaccines for free. We're talking about more than 13 vaccines for free. The 1% that don't receive the vaccines is because religious reasons, and we respect that. We have, and this is huge, 6.7 doctors per 1,000 people in Cuba, 6.7 physicians per 1,000 people in Cuba. According to World Health Organization, 44% of the state members report less than 1. You know why? Because education is for free in Cuba. So you can go all the way. There is nothing like, how do you call it, debt? School debt, something like that. There is nothing like that in Cuba. Cuba produces 62% of the medicines that we use. It's not only cigars and rum. We have a good biotech industry, and we produce vaccines, and we produce medications. 100% of the Cuban population know how to read and write. And you're probably going to say, but that is easy. No, that is not easy. According to the United Nations, 700 million of people don't know how to read and write right now. We have a population with 95% of the Cuban population has access to improved water sources, and 93% has access to improved sanitation facilities. This is also, this is also our GDP. Education, we spend 12.8% of our GDP according to the World Bank in education, and according to the World Bank in 2010, that was the highest investment in education worldwide. We spent 11% of our GDP on health. In our budget, we allocate 51% of the expenditure on education and health. You can see what are our priorities. We only spend in the military 3.1% of the GDP. And we're considered an upper middle income country. Let me say this here. I don't come here to say that we are perfect. I don't come here to say that we are better than you. I come here to say, this is Cuba. We are not what you read in the media, and we need to work together. And if we work together and we learn from each other, we are going to be able to do many things. More information about Cuba. According to United Nations, we are number 73 out of 189 countries in the Human Development Index. And this is also very important. You know why? Remember our GDP. We are not talking about a rich country. We don't have unlimited resources. We don't have oil. We don't have nothing like that. But we know what are our priorities. According to Bloomberg Global Health Index, Cuba is number 31 out of 163 countries. This is a sports. You know, I love sports, but sports are expensive. Of course, I cannot talk about winter games because we don't have any winter in Cuba. But in summer games, Olympic games, we have 78 Olympic champions. And we have 225 medals. If you go before 1959, we're talking about less than 10 medals. So everything is after the revolution. Baseball, I love baseball, you know. I came on Friday, I visited Twin Stadium. I met with Tony Oliva, the great Cuban twin. I say, well, you can use more Cuban players in the Twins, you know? And he said, yes, of course. But Cubans in the professional baseball here in the United States goes back to 1871, when Esteban Bellan was the first Cuban playing as a professional here in the United States. We were number 4 with 17 players born outside the US in opening day this year. But you know what? Cuba is the only country that don't have academies from Major League Baseball team in Cuba. We don't have an agreement between Cuba and the United States to do that. I have been 3 times in Cooperstown, the Hall of Fame, and I don't know if you are aware that you have there 323 people, 11 are Latinos, and 4 are Cubans. And again, the relation is so difficult that there is a bill in Congress to allow Cubans to come to the United States, play, and go back to Cuba. Because right now, the Cubans that play here needs to defect. What that means, they need to sign an agreement that say, I'm not going back to Cuba, I'm not going to bring back money to Cuba. Why? Because the US embargo is still in place. So this is NASA, and according to NASA, happy birthday to Arnaldo Tamayo Mendez of Cuba, first Latin American and first person of African ancestry in the space. You can see that according to WWF, Cuba is the only country in the world today that meets the criteria for sustainable development. According to the World Health Organization, Cuba is the first country in the world to receive validation for eliminating mother-to-child transmission of HIV and syphilis. And the other thing I want to mention today is Cuba has eliminated severe child malnutrition. Internet in Cuba, we have internet. We are not afraid of internet. Of course, it's slow, it's expensive. Not everybody has access like you here, but the problem is resources, infrastructure. We don't have enough about that. But you can see that we have Wi-Fi zones right now, and you go and you see the kids doing the same that you do here. Twitter, Facebook, trying to know what is happening in many things. Again, it's expensive, it's slow, but we are open for that. But when somebody says to you why there is not internet in Cuba, you can come to United Nations and say to that people, well, 48%, only 48% of the human people have internet right now in the world. So the majority of the human population don't have access to internet. So the problem is not Cuba, it's about resources. Try to go fast for a moment. These are our key trading partners. We do business with many countries, but you can see that in export, one of those countries is Canada, and in import, one of those countries is Spain. So when people come to me and ask me how is to do business with Cuba, I say, ask to the Canadians, because we have been doing business with them for many, many years. Cuba is open, you know, for relations with the United States. We believe it's good for both sides. I will try to explain that later. Cuba is not isolated anymore in the world. We have relations with 191 countries out of 193 United Nations member states. We have 115 foreign diplomatic missions in Cuba. That is a huge number when you go to other countries, you know. And we have 122 Cuban embassies abroad. We are proud to say that in all these years, more than 300,000 Cubans have provided service in more than 158 countries. I am talking about physicians, I am talking about teachers, I am talking about people that has been going to help people. And yes, we sent soldiers to Africa in the 70s and the 80s, but if you want to know why, I recommend you to read Nelson Mandela. Yes?
Is the education free for international students as well?
For some of them, we offer scholarships. For some of them, we offer a scholarship, and that is the case of this ELAN.
Yeah.
ELAN is a Latin American School of Medicine we opened that school in the late 90s to provide opportunity to some people to become doctors, and the only thing that we ask in return is to return to their communities, you know. We start with Central America because we start after 2 hurricanes hit countries in Central America. But after that, and let me put also this example, right now we have doctors in more than 60 countries in the world. I know that you read in the media that we have a lot of doctors in Venezuela because the oil. And I say, why? Well, why we have more than 400 doctors in Haiti? Why we have doctors in many countries of Africa? It's not because the oil. Yes, we have a good cooperation with Venezuela, but it's not only Venezuela. It's in more than 60 countries. But that is expensive. And sometimes we're talking about communities with many difficulties. So the best thing that you can do is take people from those communities, help them to become doctors, and they can return. Because sometimes we're talking about aboriginal nations that you don't speak that language, you don't know how to be part of that community. So if you took people from there, it's more easy, you know. And again, having doctors abroad is very expensive.
We get free food and board too.
Huh?
We get free food and board too.
Yeah, yeah. So the idea is that right now in this school we graduate so far more than 28,000 medical graduated from 103 countries. There is 175 from the United States. Probably you don't read again that in the media. Everything changed on December the 17th, you know, when both 2014, when both President Barack Obama and President Raul Castro announced to the world that they were ready to start a new moment in the bilateral relation. That doesn't mean that everything was okay and we agree in everything, but that means that we were ready to work together. And even, this is some photos that are important to remember. And I always say, you know, we open our embassy in DC, you open your embassy in Havana. These 2 women were the leaders of were leading the negotiations. And I say, you know, we put women to solve problems that men create. That is great, you know. And we have these important meetings, and we are still here. Nothing bad happened. You know, for many years, some people say, okay, if you restart the diplomatic relations, it's going to be terrible. No, we are still here, you know. So this is my ambassador in Washington, D.C. He was the first Cuban ambassador to present credentials to a U.S. president since 1959. That is our embassy, by the way, in D.C. Your president visited Cuba, was the first president since 1928.
Wow.
Is here somebody from 1928? I always ask that question because I want to know how the visit was, you know. But look at this, according to the New York Times, 6 in 10 Americans think restoring diplomacy with Cuba is mostly good for the U.S. And you can see that your president, we gave the opportunity to address the Cuban people live on Cuban national TV. And he said, as President of the United States, I have called on our Congress to lift the embargo. To lift the embargo. The only president that visited Cuba was President Coolidge in 1928. President Obama said, President Coolidge needs 3 days. I need 3 hours to come to Cuba. And why this is happening, and this is very important. I have been told that here in the United States you love polls. You always want to see what people say about something. Well, according to all the polls, American polls, the majority of the American people support relations with Cuba. I'm going to use only one because I have more than 10, but only one here. This is Pew, and you can see the difference in January 2015, July 2015, and December 2016, so after the elections. And you can see that 75% of the American people support the relation between Cuba and the United States, but 73% support the end of the US embargo. But for the first time, we can say that it's also what the majority of the Cuban Americans wants. We have more than 2 million of Cuban Americans here in the United States. The majority are in Florida, but we have in all the 50 states, There are like 348 in Alaska. I don't know what they do there because the weather is so different. But we have, again, Cuban Americans in all the 50 states. And you can see the difference. In 1991, according to Florida International University, only 14% of support for lifting the US embargo. In 2016, 63%. And it's 63% of all the generations. If you go only to the last generation of Cuban Americans, so the people between 1996 and 2016, we are talking about more than 80% of support for the relations. This is Gallup, and you can see in 1996, only 10% of the American people has a good opinion about my country. Look at the change. In 2016, for the first time, the majority has a good opinion about my country. There is again a setback, but at least 48% or 49% has a good opinion about my country. That's amazing. You know why? Because the majority of the things that you read here are bad things about my country. And the other issue is that you have not been able to travel to Cuba. So you are only talking about things that you read. So I am sure that if you are able to go to Cuba, we are going to have better numbers. We have support in many places. States like Alabama, for example, California. You know, Alabama is a very Republican state, and they put a resolution in the Senate in support of the relation between Cuba and the United States. You know why? They put that they have a trade relation with Cuba that is about $32 million. And I say it's 32 million with the embargo. Imagine without the embargo. We have all these governors traveling to Cuba. By the way, your former lieutenant governor, which is right now the senator, Smith, travels to Cuba last year. I don't know what happened.
You just have to click on your PowerPoint at the bottom. Do you see at the at the bottom of your screen? I think you just minimized it.
Oh, okay. No?
The other one, the PowerPoint.
For some reason,
Why don't you
disappeared.
go? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Chucky here.
You have to drag it from the left.
For some reason,
Do you think
disappeared
it
everything.
dragged?
Yes.
Look at here. Yeah. Okay, thank you so
I'm
much.
not sure which slide
Yeah,
we're on.
it
Sorry.
is.
That's showing
You see what we need to
You
work
have to
together?
drag it.
Wait, no,
When you're on the back, it
You have
like
to
flips the screen.
Yeah, but from where?
Not here.
Do you know how to do it?
Maybe.
Both women.
Well, again, we need to work together.
And it's women that are helping.
Yeah. Problems that men create.
Oh, there it is.
Oh,
You're smart. Thank you.
that's great. Thank you so much to both. So I'm going more quick. By the way, I don't know if you know that there was a resolution, right? Also, is this one?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. There is a resolution in different cities here in the United States also in support, but there is a resolution in Minneapolis. The city of Minneapolis approved a resolution in support of the relation between Cuba and the United States. That is the most recent resolution. So we have people in the Congress, because Congress is very important right now to end the U.S. embargo, and you have people like Tom Emmer, which is from Minnesota, Betty McCollum, and also Senator Klobuchar. Those are people that are fighting for better relations, and I believe it's not because only for Cuba. You know, they understand that it's good for the United States for many reasons. This is my ambassador, and why we don't have normal relations between Cuba and the United States. In Cuba, we believe that bilateral relations with the United States will be normal only when we exercise full sovereignty on all our territory, when we are no longer under the sanction regime, and when no specific programs are funded to alter our way of life. I will try to explain that very quick. What is the embargo? This is the idea behind the embargo. This is a secret memorandum that right now is very easy to find online in the Foreign Relations of the United States, you go to the State Department website, historian of the State Department, and you can see this volume, and then you can see this memorandum, 499. And they say the majority of Cubans support Castro. This is 1960, so before Bay of Pigs, before we say that we were socialists. The lowest estimate I have seen is 50%. There is not effective political opposition. Let's go to the last two lines. What they propose, we need to deny money and supplies to Cuba, to decrease monetary and real wages, to bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow of the government. That is what the embargo means. It's a war. It's an economic war that has been in place since that moment, 1960. But you can see that they want to create hunger, desperation, and overthrow of a government that has at least 50% of support in a country that you don't see political opposition. Why? So, in the last State of the Union, your former President Obama put this in his speech. 50 years of isolating Cuba has failed to promote democracy and set us back in Latin America. That is why we restore diplomatic relations. Applause. You don't have to applause, it's what they did in the House. Opening the door to travel and commerce, positioning ourselves to improve the life of the Cuban people. Applause. So if you want to consolidate our leadership and credibility in the hemisphere, recognize that the Cold War is over. Lift the embargo. And the embargo is not a bilateral issue between Cuba and the United States anymore. There is 193 members in the United Nations. Cuba introduced for the last 25 years a resolution asking for support, asking to the United States to lift the embargo. Last year, 191 countries support that resolution. Only the United States and Israel opposed to that resolution. And let me ask you this question. If the majority of the American, according to the polls, if the majority of the American people don't want the embargo, if the majority of the Cuban Americans don't want the embargo, if almost every country in the world don't want the embargo, why the embargo is still in place? Somebody in Boston told me, that is a good question. And I say, thank you, I need a good answer. You know, sometimes we have a lot of passion with this, because there is people suffering in Cuba for nothing, you know, just to do what a minority wants. But look at how much the embargo cost to Cuba, $4 billion last year. That is money not that we don't have, it's money that we spent because of the embargo. So, Guantanamo, I don't have time if you want to make a question, but imagine, what is Guantanamo? It's a military base that you have been there since 1903. Imagine that you invite one day somebody to your house, one room, and now you are not able to say to that people, get out. That is what happened in Guantanamo. And we signed an agreement that says that it's forever. You know, the territory that you have in Guantanamo is 2 times the territory that you have in Manhattan. So it's not a small place. And you know how much do you pay for that? $4,085. And by the way, we don't collect the money because it's not about money. But somebody told me New York probably is the rent of one apartment in Manhattan. But that is true. Another issue that is very important, you are sending taxpayer money not to build schools in Cuba, not to help hospitals, not to help people. You're sending money, and this is the Congressional Research Service, to democracy efforts. And between 1996 and 2018, you sent $344 million. So for some people that support the embargo, this is a way of life. You have a congresswoman here, Betty McCollum, that introduced a bill in Congress, in the last Congress, in 114 Congress, that say, stop wasting taxpayer money on Cuban Broadcasting Act. I don't know if you know, probably, and shortly you don't know, what is Radio Martí, TV Martí, and Martí Noticias Web. There is a radio station, a TV station, a website that you create here in the United States with your money to broadcast propaganda against Cuba. since 1983. According to Congresswoman Betty McCollum, that's cost to you $700 million in all this year. Imagine if we create a radio station and we use the name of Washington, Radio Washington, to broadcast propaganda against the United States. It's crazy. So, we have bills in Congress. When people say, what we can do? Okay, there is people in Congress that are fighting for you. And we have, I'm going only to talk about these two issues that are very important. One is freedom to travel to Cuba. Freedom to travel to Cuba. Right now, this bill has 55 senators that support that bill. I don't know you, but it's 55% of support. It's the majority of the Senate. Nothing happened. Freedom to travel to Cuba is not a concession to Cuba. It's about your freedom. Why you can go to other countries, but not to Cuba. And the other one is about trade, exports. And it's interesting, this bill is from Senator Klobuchar. And this bill in the House is for Congressman Tom Emers, both from Minnesota. It's important that you know that. And again, this is not solidarity with Cuba. This is not because they are communists. This is because they know that it's good for their farmers here to sell the products to Cuba. We're talking about 11 million of people, plus 5 million of tourists. So, unfortunately, nothing happened. The leadership don't allow a vote. And again, there is a majority there. So, agricultural sales, I put this the other day to some farmers here, and they say, wow, it's amazing. Cuba buys $2 billion in food. 70 to 80% of our food is not produced in Cuba. We buy it abroad. Look at this. We buy here in 2014 only 300 million, and in other countries 1.8 billion. You know why? Because it's prohibited by law here in the United States to give credits to Cuba to buy agricultural products. So we buy rice in Vietnam, milk in New Zealand. Why? You know how much we have to pay for transportation? I say the other day to those farmers, it's a win-win relation. I don't care to put more money in your pockets if I can put more food in our table. And we are not talking about governments, we're talking about people. By the way, according to one magazine here, there is a potential only for Minnesota that is about 47 million to 119 million. Here only in Minnesota. So, almost the end, okay, we have opportunities for medical cooperation. There is a cancer vaccine that we bring to New York, sent to Governor Cuomo, and now we create a joint venture company. It's the first US-Cuba company ever, and it's for a cancer vaccine. We bring Cuban doctors to Chicago, and we are doing other projects, but it's very difficult because of the embargo. You know, according to the State Department, a student here in the United States likes to go to Cuba. You can see this is from the State Department, and they say that Cuba was in the top 7 destination for students studying abroad. You can see Argentina, Brazil, Costa Rica, Cuba, Ecuador, Mexico, and Peru. And this is since they opened a little bit the door in 2015. You can see the increase, 58% of increase. So, we did a wonderful art festival in the Kennedy Center this year. In May, we bring a lot of Cuban artists, but we are doing many things in sports. This is a boxing match between people from Pittsburgh and one team from Cuba. So there is a lot of opportunities. Right now, we have all those airliners traveling to Cuba, American, United, Delta, Southwest. Only Alaska canceled his flight between LA and Havana, and was because the new administration put reverse part of what President Obama did. We have all these crews going to Cuba. Now if you go to Cuba, you can use your cell phone because we signed agreements with all those companies, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile. We signed an agreement with Caterpillar, with John Deere. There is one hotel right now in Cuba that is running by a US company, Sheraton, that belongs to Marriott. And people say, are you okay with that? And I say, well, we have 20 hotels with Spain. Why not with the United States? Last year, for the first time, we received more than 1 million of visitors from the United States. Even when they have to apply for a license, and the majority don't know how to travel, we received more than 600 Southern Americans and more than 400 Southern Cuban Americans, so 1 million in total. Well, in Cuba we did elections. I know that probably you don't read that in the media. And we have a new leadership in Cuba. This is the president of our national parliament and the vice president and the secretary. And we have a new president, a new first vice president, 5 vice presidents, and a secretary. I invite you to read the names. I don't see Castro there. Because for many years, the problem is the Castro. I don't see any Castro. Those names, you know. And this is important because in 1959, the people that didn't want the relations say, okay, this is a few months. After Bay of Pigs, they say the problem is the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union disappeared in 1991. And the same people say the problem is Fidel Castro. Well, Fidel was not in power in 2006, and he passed away in 2016. And the same people say the problem is Raúl Castro. Well, Raúl is not the president anymore. What that means, that if you want one excuse, you're going to always be able to find one excuse. This is my ambassador again, sorry. He said, I keep repeating that our foreign policy is based on principles. No one should expect dramatic change in the way we develop our relationship with the United States because it is based on history and principles. Our new president came to the United States last month. Probably you didn't read that in the media, but he came to the United Nations. He made this speech September 26, and he said, Cuba stands ready to develop respectful and civilized relations with the US government on the basis of sovereignty, equality, and mutual respect. This is the will of the Cuban people, and we know this is a shared aspiration by most US citizens, and particularly by Cubans living here. What else do you need? The US government is willing to sit down with almost every government in the world, but not with Cuba. Probably because we don't have nuclear weapons. So, what do you know about Cuba? I hope you have more information about Cuba so far. We can start again. No. Would you like to visit Cuba? Well, probably you have more reasons right now to go to Cuba. Do you consider that Cuba and the United States can have normal relations? Probably you have more reason to support the idea that yes, we can have normal relations and the only thing that we want is goodwill and respect. I cannot change this right now, but probably for the future. And now you have more ideas about the treatment that we receive here in the media. This is a commercial, you don't need to pay nothing. If you want more information about our country, you can follow our Twitter account. This is my ambassador, this is my Twitter account. You can visit our Facebook page. We try to put there all the information about what is happening in the relation. Almost for the end, this is the Pope. The Pope was very important in the last approach between Cuba and the United States. He wrote letters to both presidents, and he visited Cuba, and after that he came to the United States, and he made one speech in front of the whole Congress, and he mentioned the golden rule. Do unto others as you will have them do unto you. We don't blockade the United States. The United States should not blockade Cuba. That is the idea. And of course, President Kennedy again. So let us not be blind to our difference, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and to the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our difference, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal. He made that speech and he was talking about the Soviet Union. Why not with Cuba? So this is the final. Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. If our dreams of yesterday are today's reality, our dreams of today will be tomorrow's realities, and thus be the same for all people of the world if we are able to dream of a better future together. President Kennedy and President Castro. So for those who wants to cut the relations, I like to say they belong to the past and they are going to miss the future. For those who wants to build a better future, we can start today. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for all the time.
That's exactly 45 minutes. I'm impressed.
Wow.
So, why don't we open it up to everyone, questions that people may have about anything that Miguel said. Yeah.
Why were so many Cuban Americans opposed to opening up relations with Cuba, and what changed to make them support that?
I think it's a very important question, but as you see in the poll I showed from Florida International University, there's not a majority anymore. The first generation that left Cuba in 1959 was the generation that was around the former President Batista, the dictator, and they lost everything in Cuba. You know, the properties, they abandoned all that. They came to the United States, they received all the support. This is the generation that was part of AFP. So there is a lot of passion there. And I can understand that. If you say to me that those people want to punish a whole country 50 years after, because what happened in 1959, probably I can understand. But don't say to me that they want to help the Cuban people, because the embargo is hurting the Cuban people. So there is a lot of passion, and again, I can understand that. But it's impossible for some of those people to say, I know what is happening in Cuba. They have not returned to Cuba. You know, some of them never have lived in Cuba. You have two senators right now. One was born in Canada, the other was born here. What they know about Cuba? And they claim that they are Cuban Americans, and they claim that they want to help the Cuban people. The embargo is doing the opposite.
Ted Cruz.
Yes, Ted Cruz is senator from Texas, was born in Canada, and Senator Marco Rubio was born in Florida. And by the way, he lies, or at least he made a mistake. Yes, I'm a diplomat, I try to. But I have here, I can share that with you, according to the Washington Post, when he was running to be a senator, he said, okay, my parents came to the United States escaping from communist Cuba. Here it's difficult to say something like that because records are very easy to find. And when they find the records, their parents came in 1956. At that time, Fidel was in Mexico, Batista was in Cuba. So after that, when evidence was shown to him, he said, oh, my mom never told me that. I'm going to give you the article, by the way, I have it here. Remember at the end.
Before I forget, we'll bring in some information next week or two about travel opportunities to Cuba in May and next summer, if people are interested. Carl?
You mentioned briefly Angola. Could you talk a little bit about what the fight in Angola was about, why Cubans went to Angola, and what impact that had on US-Cuban relations?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful question. Again, also, my father spent 4 years in Angola. My father. That was voluntary, you know, that's very important. Angola asked help from Cuba to fight against South Africa. And you remember the apartheid system that for many years the United States government support in South Africa. So we sent soldiers there to fight that war. And we helped other countries in Africa to win their independence. That cost to Cuba 2,000 lives. We lost 2,000 people, not only soldiers, of course, other workers that were there. It was a very important moment for Cuba, you know, to know what was the worst capitalism. And I remember always Fidel, because Fidel said, we are not helping, we are paying our historic debt to Africa. Because many slaves came to Cuba to fight for the Cuban independence. So for my father, it was a great experience, you know. But at that time, and you can read it now, there was negotiations between Cuba and the United States. And the United States offered Cuba, okay, if you want to restart a diplomatic relation, you have to withdraw from Africa, and we say no. And people believe that we went to Africa because the Soviet Union. That is also another myth. Soviet Union was against the president of Cuba and the way that we deal with the war in those countries. But my best advice about that is read what Nelson Mandela said about Cuba. Now Nelson Mandela is a Nobel Prize, but for many years here they say that he was a terrorist. Well, when he was free, he went to Cuba. It was one of the first countries that he visited.
One of our readings for the class is Nelson Mandela's book, How Far We Slaves Have Come. It's about Mandela's visit to Cuba in 1991.
One second,
Yeah.
because now for me was something important. You know, this book from one of the advisors of President Obama, Ben Rhodes. He wrote a book recently, and he was leading also the secret negotiation between Cuba and the United States. And when President Mandela passed away, South Africa invited a few leaders, you know, abroad Africa. One was President Obama, and the other one was President Raul Castro. So according to Ben Rhodes, he approached to President Obama and said, what are we going to do? That is going to be a public moment. And the response from President Obama was, Cubans were in the right side of history. We were not. Sorry.
That's all right. I have two questions. One is that since we're speaking of Cuban involvement in Africa, can you talk about the role of Cuba in the Ogaden War, in Somali-Ethiopia War between 1970s, where Cuba sent around thousands of Cuban troops to help Ethiopia fight Somalia, and what that had, it had any impact on US-Cuban relations, because the US supported Somalia in the war. So I was wondering if that had any impact in the US-Cuban relation.
Yes, again, we were in different sides of the battlefield, you know, and was almost the same that in Angola. It's the same for the whole continent, you know. We helped not only Angola, not only South Africa, Namibia, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, all those countries, and was for the same reason. And as I mentioned before, part of the negotiation at that time was, okay, if you remove your troops from Africa, we're going to restart diplomatic relations. We say no, that cannot be a condition for us to have normal relations between both countries. But we keep our help all those years, we keep our cooperation all those years, despite the pressure from the United States.
I will find, there's an article on this that Castro explains why Cuba sided with Ethiopia in that war, and I'll find it and
Enjoy.
make it available. I'll email it to everyone in the class.
All right. I had one more question.
Yeah, sure.
It was about, I was reading a report on the Human Rights Watch, and then it shows that, you know, Cuba has, you know, suppressed political decisions. So I was wondering if you're safe to, you know, to speak against the rulers or like against the government. If there's the freedom of, you know, of speech and freedom of, you know, association or so. So if you can a little bit speak about the human rights in Cuba.
Go to social media. You're going to see people that live in Cuba that criticize the government very openly. People who have Twitter accounts and they're not in jail. You know, you don't go to jail in Cuba because you criticize the government, because you oppose the government. You go to jail if you broke the law. And many of these people, again, receive money from the US government. Those 300 million that I mentioned goes to those people. I don't mean the whole money. The majority of that money stayed here in the United States, stayed in Florida. By the way, all the crews come from Florida. The majority of the flights come from Florida, so they are making business with Cuba. But they don't want other people to make business with Cuba. So the idea of Human Rights Watch and other organizations like that receive money from the US government, we say, again, I represent my government. You don't have to believe me, but go to Cuba. you're going to see that it's not the image that you read here. And by the way, CNN is in Cuba. Associated Press is in Cuba. Try to find a beating to a Cuban that disappeared, a Cuban that is killed. And I can read almost every day that happened in other countries. So again, that doesn't mean that we are perfect. But there is a lot of propaganda to try to support the embargo with your money. But it's not what the majority of American people wants, because, and also what the people that goes to Cuba see in our country. There is not political disappearance in Cuba. I remember I like to go to the museums in DC. There is a museum in DC that is the Newseum, the museum about the news. There's a place where you can put any country in the world, and they're going to say to you when was the last the last journalist that was killed in that country. You put Cuba, and you're going to see that the last journalist killed in Cuba was in 1958 during the Batista regime. So again,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yes. I know when you were in Africa, when you came back to Cuba, you took 2,000 dead Cubans back with you.
Yeah.
You took orphans back with you.
Mhm.
You took Africans wounded to be treated medically in
Yeah.
Cuba. Now, how many claims did you stake out? How much oil did you take back? What did you rate? Did you rate Cuba of its natural resources?
No.
Right.
That is another part of, even there was a small part of the Cuban population that didn't support our presence in Africa, because we were there to fight for the independence, but not to bring back anything. I remember one politician from Africa that one time said, the only thing that Cubans are taking back are the remains of the people that have been killed here in Africa. And again, 2,000 people in that time for us was huge, but we don't take nothing
Right.
those years.
So does Cuba have like bipartisan or pluralist representation, which is to say, like, how strong are opposition parties within Cuba, especially considering the recent election?
My best advice is ask to the Cuban people, go to Cuba and ask, because again, I represent my government. There is only one political party allowed in Cuba, but you don't need to be a member of that party in order to be a member of the different institutions in Cuba. I was a student in the Havana University, and I was proposed to be in the ballot to be part of the provincial parliament, your state Congress. Not in the nation, at the level of the state. And I wasn't a student. I was no member of even of the Communist Party. So there are opportunities for people to represent. And in the most basic level, you really need to believe in that area. You need to be proposed, and you need to receive the majority of the votes of the people that live in that area. So everybody is able to be elected in the elections in Cuba, and 50% or up to 50% of the Cuban National Assembly needs to be have those kind of people, the people that is elected directly by the base, by the community. So again, you don't need to be a member of the Communist Party, and the party has not a direct participation in the elections. It's not a political, it's not an electoral party in that case. But if that is the reason to not have normal relations, my question always is why the United States have relations with countries that don't allow political parties. So we don't say that the system is perfect, but it's what the majority support in Cuba. We don't want division, and in order to, I think it's a good opportunity for you to practice Spanish. Go to the social media, the main newspapers in Cuba, and right now it's possible to make comments, like here, and people do very tough comments about many issues in Cuba. So
I know this is something that gets touched on in the Mid Post article. but like it seemed like there was some semblance of hope with like Amy Klobuchar and Tom Emmer to like restore relations. But now in 2018 with the new administration, can you just like talk about how that's changed?
You know, the problem is that, again, Cuba is not a priority for your politicians here. You have many issues that are really important for you, the economy, many other things. As I said before, we don't have nuclear weapons. We are not a threat for the United States. So still, there's this minority control the narrative and the debate and the policy toward Cuba. There was a lot of pressure to President Trump to change what President Obama did. And you know that he changed many of the things that President Obama did. So our point is the door is open. That is what I say in that article. The door is open on our side. We only want goodwill and respect. And we believe this is what the majority of the society wants. Again, people say, wait to 2020. We don't need to wait. Why we don't do it now? But we need the government to work with. But at the same time, we can work with other institutions, states, foundations, cities, and for that reason, I'm here. So I have a meeting this afternoon with professors from this university to see how we can send more students to Cuba. And that is good because you are the future. If you go to Cuba and you come back, you probably tomorrow can help to build this relation. And for that reason, I am here at this time talking with all of you because I really believe this is important. You know, and all of you deserve the information. And I want to hear what do you think. Even this, when you say, okay, what about the freedom in Cuba? What about that? And I say, go to Cuba. Try to see what is the situation in Cuba. Again, it's not a perfect country, but it's a country that works, that has done many things. And for that reason, have the support of even your allies. When the European Union support the resolution that Cuba introduced about the embargo, it's not because solidarity with Cuba. We don't give their rum or cigars. It's because they want to do business with Cuba, and the embargo is hurting their interests in this case. Thank you. Yes, please.
Here and then Tasha, yeah.
Why Israel wants the embargo to continue, and what's the relationship between Cuba and Israel?
I have to say that Israel is probably the best ally of the U.S. government. And the last year of President Obama, when we introduced that same resolution asking to release to lift the embargo, the U.S. abstained. They didn't vote in opposition. They vote in abstention, and Israel do the same. You know, they vote in abstention.
They abstain.
Yeah. So that year, you can say no country in the world support the U.S. embargo. 191 in favor and 2 abstention. And you know what happened when your former ambassador to the United Nations made the speech saying we are going to abstain? The whole room was applaud. You know, there is a video that you can check in YouTube or probably in the United Nations website. When the former ambassador was there saying we are going to vote in abstention, everybody applauds. That means you have the support of the majority.
Tasha, and then in the back, yeah.
I'm in support of Cuba, but I'm just asking as a direct source. So if all these problems are not true about Cuba, what are the actual weaknesses in Cuba?
Sorry, what are the
What are the actual weaknesses in Cuba?
weaknesses? No, it's interesting, the question. You know, we know that everything is not because of the blockade. We know that. But we say that the blockade is the main obstacle for our development. But at the same time, we have to say that we suffer from climate change. We know why we buy 80% of our food abroad, because we don't produce enough. You know why? Because students go to the university, they don't have to go to the farm. They don't want to go to the farm. And we don't have immigrants to do that work in Cuba. So there are many things that you can see right now as weaknesses. There is a new generation that don't know what was Cuba before 1959. But I don't say that that is a weakness. You know, that is a challenge, to be honest. We suffer a major hurricane almost every year in Cuba. But we are prepared. We work together, and you don't see the numbers that you see in other places of people that die or the time that you need to restore power in those countries. We have to say right now that the economy is a great problem because we need to import almost all the oil that we consume, and every day those prices are difficult for us. So those are real issues, but remember this number. The embargo, the blockade cost to Cuba $4 billion. In order to buy 80% of the food that we need, we spend $2 billion. So without the embargo, we have twice the money that we need for food. So we can use those $2 billion here and the extra $2 billion to improve the life of the Cuban people. You know, in the 80s, you didn't see any Cuban defecting to come to play here in the Major League Baseball. Why? Because the economy was good at that time. But in 1991, we lost 80% of our trade overnight because the Soviet Union disappeared. So we had that thing that was the special period with blackouts for more than 10 hours per day, not enough transportation, not enough food. So we, I don't know, you know, Cubans are proud, and they say we don't have any weakness. We are going to fight whatever that happens. But of course, without the blockade, it's going to be more easy. We are going to have new challenge, but at least we deserve the opportunity to live without the blockade. Thanks for the question.
In the back, and then Cynthia. Yeah.
Well, the way I look at it, Cuba is a tremendous example, but it's also something for us here to emulate and learn from. I'll take healthcare as an example. Right now, you may have noticed we're going through an election cycle here, and all these, if you turn on the television, it's maddening, right? You know, all this, and everybody says they're for healthcare, and my opponents are against healthcare, whatever. Well, there's no way we're going to get healthcare in this society until we emulate Cuba. As you mentioned, you know, the health rate, doctors in Cuba, training around the world, the healthcare is free. Here, healthcare is part of the private property system. It's part of the private profit system, and will be until we change that. That's why you can't take programs in Cuba that are successful and just transplant them here. It won't work. We have to do what the people in Cuba did in 1959. We have to overthrow this system. We have to have a system based on workers and farmers and what our class needs and what humanity needs. That's what I mean by emulating Cuba. I know you can't, as a diplomat, you have to be very diplomatic. That's the way I look at it. I was inspired by Cuba when I was in college a long time ago, when Cuba went to Africa. I didn't know anything about Cuba. When I heard Cuban troops were in Angola fighting against the apartheid army, that settled the question for me, and I said, what is this? So, you know, it had an effect on people around the world and still does today. So I just wanted to say that because until we emulate Cuba and do what our class in Cuba did, we'll continue to have these problems. And that's the best aid we can give Cuba, by the way, I think.
Well, as diplomat, you know, I appreciate you understand what I said at the beginning. I come here not to say that we are better than you. I come here to say let's work together. And also the idea, you know, that I try to build the relations. So thank you for that. Yes.
Okay, so my question is kind of two-pronged, and it goes off of that.
Okay.
So my parents grew up in communist Romania,
Okay.
and it not good. So there are also a lot of instances within the Soviet Union where the communism wasn't egalitarian, it was very corrupt. What would you say the difference is between that implementation of communism and how it worked out in Cuba? Because the numbers that you showed us are extremely good even by non-communist standards. So I'm just curious as to why you think that is. And then also if you think that a system like communism would be feasible in a country that's as large and decentralized but at the same time centralized as the United States.
Wow, that's a great question. How many times do we have? No, I think it's a very good question, but I have to talk only about Cuba, you know, in respect. But, you know, when I have one book, The Memories of Khrushchev, you know, the former leader of the Soviet Union. And I was trying to find what they knew about Cuba in 1959. And he said, I didn't know nothing about Fidel Castro. So the revolution in Cuba was not because of the Soviet Union.
No, yeah,
and that is very important.
Saying that, yeah.
No, yes, but that's I try to explain to the rest of the people, because when you come from a country like Romania and other countries,
it's really bad.
Soviet Union played a great role in bringing communists to those countries.
Yeah.
Was not the case of Cuba.
Yes.
And that's very important.
Yes.
So in the first 2 years of the Cuban Revolution, we didn't say we are communists, we are socialists. There were leaders that believed in those ideas, but they start doing changes in Cuba. So when Bay of Pigs start on April 15, planes from the U.S. goes to Cuba to, how do you say? To bomb the airports in Cuba, to destroy the Air Force of Cuba. And the day that we bury the people that died in those bombings, Fidel asked the Cuban people, do you agree with the agrarian reform? People say, yes, of course. They gave the land to the people. Do you agree with the giving the house to the people? You don't have to pay rent, all that. People say, yes, yes. Do you agree with the opportunity for you to go to the school, and people say, yes, yes. And Fidel said, that is socialism. And now we are fighting for socialism. So it was a natural process in our history. And the day after, start Bay of Pigs. For that reason, we say that was the first battle of we as socialist country. So the way I see socialism, because we cannot talk about communism. Communism is only in the books.
Yeah.
You know? The way I see socialism is a society with equal opportunities for everyone. It's not about gender, it's not about race, it's not about wealth, how wealthy you are. It's about equal opportunities to everybody. So my father was a farmer that has to work with 8 years old, because he was born in 1939, so 20 years before the revolution. He never had the opportunity to go to the university, and now I'm a diplomat in probably the most important embassy for my country abroad. Why this happened? Because I had the opportunity. And you can imagine how proud are my parents. But the whole life, they were saying to me, you have to go to a school, you have to be a good student, you have to, wow. So, having Fidel, who was a great leader in Cuba, was very important. Now there is a challenge because we have a new generation in charge. But my point is, we see the same things that we saw in Fidel. The revolution is going to be there. Because I can say to all of you how difficult it was when we lost 80% of our trade. It was more easy to surrender. And people never give up. You know? So it's about that, and it's about conscience. For that reason, we say this is a battle of ideas.
Yeah.
You need to explain people why. You know what I do here in the United States? I leave, the professor saw me the other day, I leave the room and I turn off the lights. Why? Because I know I'm helping the environment. And I remember that I had 10 hours of blackout every day because we didn't have enough oil to produce energy. So I don't care if I'm here in the United States or in Romania or in Cuba, I try to help the environment because all are human beings. And we all deserve access to the same resources, but we don't have access to the same resources. So it's about all that. You know, probably you go to a Cuban kid right now, you ask that question, what is socialism, what is communism, and he's going to talk about Marx, Engels, Lenin. Or you go to another, he's going to say, it's me going to the university. It's me having my mom with cancer and don't have to think about I have insurance or not. You know, Is me going to, that is about that, you know.
Do you then call Cuba a socialist country, not communist?
We believe that we are socialists and we are fighting for the communist society.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it's not possible to talk about communist society right now.
Yeah.
Because that means that everybody is equal and everybody have the same
Paradigm shift, and yeah.
utopia.
Yeah.
To be honest. So I'm sorry, I tried to do my best to answer to your question. I hope I
No, yeah,
did
that was
it.
good. But do you think it's feasible in the United States?
Wow. You know, I'm a diplomat. I'm a diplomat. Let's talk after. Let's talk after. You know, that's the dream of many people even here in the United States. That is what I can say to you. But you know what? It's about human beings. It's not a matter, you know, I remember I was a professor in Havana University when I was a student at the same time, but I teach to first year student law, and they told me, I had one student that was very religious, you know, he was really believing God, he practiced, and you know, there is a fight in Cuba, the people that believe in God, they don't believe in communism. And he made a lot of questions to me. I say, you know what? I would love that people do what the Bible says.
Yeah.
We can be better human beings, but you know, almost, it's difficult, you know. But people don't follow the Bible, even when they say they are religious. So it's about being good human beings. If you are a good human being, thank you.
In the back, yeah, probably our last question, maybe. Yeah.
I was just wondering, for people that say that Castro was a dictator, what's your opinion on that?
I come from a macho culture. You know, in Cuba, we were calling from Spain, we are tough men, we don't cry. When Fidel passed away, I cried. I had the opportunity to meet Fidel. Fidel was a man that probably was more easy for him to leave the island, live in another place. He was all the time with the people, you know. You know what he asked when he passed away? He asked, please don't put a name to any street in Cuba with my name. Please don't put my name in any school. I don't want a statue. I don't want bus. I don't want nothing. You know? It's difficult. I'm sure that it's difficult to explain how Cubans feel about Fidel. But he was always there. If we have a hurricane, Fidel was there. If we had a problem with in Bay of Pig, Fidel was there. You know? And always was there. There is a very interesting story when Africa, when the battle in Angola, there is a Soviet, a very high-ranking officer that came to Cuba and said to Fidel, well, explain what are you doing in Angola? And Fidel was in a map saying, okay, we have troops here and we're going here, and you know that the weather is like this, and you know that the conditions of the ground is like this. And that Soviet officer say, okay, our intelligence is so bad that I never knew that you went to Angola. And Fidel said, I never have been in Angola. But he was directing that battle with all the expertise. And after he went to Angola, you know, in the middle of the most difficult moment of the battle, he went to Angola to be with the soldiers. So Fidel was a human being, very concerned about many issues. And he gained the respect even of some of his enemies. And that is very important. For that reason, as I mentioned before, you know, a lot of people in Cuba cried the day he passed away. And he was not in power since 2006. So for the last 10 years, we didn't saw Fidel, you know. Fidel was in his home, writing and all that, but people was happy with the idea that Fidel is there. He's ill, he's retired, but he's there. So the day that he passed away was hard. And was hard because he was a leader of the people. Not because the money, not because the nothing. There is no property in Cuba. under Fidel and under the family of Fidel, and was a leader. He made the revolution. He led the revolution since the beginning, and for that reason, he has that political capital. But he never used that. You know, he was always fighting. And again, it's difficult to explain that. But go to Cuba, ask the Cuban people, and you're going to see why we love Fidel.
It's 8:50, and people who have to leave can leave. And if people want to hang out a little bit and have informal discussion with Miguel, we can do it.
Thank you so
Really
much.
want to thank you for this.